The lecture hall fell silent as Commander Zixthal activated the holographic display. 87 cadets from 12 different species sat in tiered rows, their various appendages poised over data tablets, ready to absorb the wisdom of military history. This was the first day of advanced tactical warfare at the Galactic Defense Academy, and nobody wanted to miss a single detail. In the back row, Lieutenant Marcus Chen slumped in his seat, trying to make himself invisible. At 23 standard years, he was the youngest officer ever admitted to the Academy's command track, and he felt every curious eye that had tracked him since. He'd walked through the doors that... "Morning. Too young," the Vrelian cadet had whispered. "Humans always think they're special," a Korthian had muttered. Marcus had kept his head down, his jaw tight. He'd heard it all before. Commander Zixthal's crystalline voice cut through the murmurs. "Today we begin with the most important lesson you will learn at this academy. We will study the Battle of Kepler 442b, the engagement that changed the course of the Sovereign War." The hologram flickered to life, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. His own face stared back at him from the display, not as he was now, but as he'd been 3 years ago, younger, leaner, with eyes that hadn't yet learned to hide their fear. The image was frozen mid-motion, his uniform torn, his face streaked with dirt and blood, his rifle raised as explosions bloomed behind him. The lecture hall erupted in whispers. 86 heads swiveled toward the back row. Marcus wanted to sink through the floor. Commander Zixthal's 6 eyes swept across the room, demanding silence. "This," she said, her chitinous finger pointing at the hologram, "is Corporal Marcus Chen, human, age 20 standard years at the time of the battle. Before we discuss tactics, formations, or strategic brilliance, we must first address the question I see forming in your minds." She paused, letting the tension build. How did a child change the tide of an interstellar war? The Vrelian cadet who had called Marcus too young now sat rigid in his seat, his gill slits fluttering with embarrassment. "The Sovereign Fleet had overwhelmed our defenses on Kepler 442b," Zixthal continued, her voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. 7 colonies were under siege. The Galactic Defense Force had lost 60% of its ground troops in the first wave. High Command had issued the retreat order. The planet was to be abandoned. The hologram shifted, showing orbital imagery of the planet's surface, burning cities, advancing enemy formations, fleeing civilian transports. The human garrison received the order. 147 soldiers, including Corporal Chen's unit. They were told to fall back to the evacuation point. They would be the last off-world. Marcus remembered that moment with crystalline clarity, the static-filled communication from the command ship, his lieutenant's face pale and determined. The choice they'd all made together. "The humans did not retreat," Zixthal said softly. A Korthian cadet raised her foreclaw. "Commander, why would they disobey a direct order? That's insubordination." "An excellent question." Zixthal's mandibles curved into what might have been a smile. "Let us ask them ourselves. Lieutenant Chen, would you care to explain?" Every eye in the room fixed on Marcus. He stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. His voice, when it came, was steady. "There were civilians, ma'am. 40,000 still trapped in the siege zone. The evacuation transports couldn't reach them through the Sovereign lines. High Command had written them off. And you believed you could save them?" The question wasn't mocking. Zixthal genuinely wanted to know. "No, ma'am," Marcus said quietly. "We knew we'd die, but we thought we might buy them enough time." The hologram shifted again, showing tactical overlays, troop movements, impossible odds. 147 humans, Zixthal narrated, against an army of 12,000 Sovereign shock troops. The tactical analysis gave them a 0.3% chance of survival. Every military algorithm predicted total annihilation within 6 hours as they lasted 4 days. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. Corporal Chen's unit held the Meridian Bridge for 18 hours straight. When their ammunition ran out, they used Sovereign weapons. When those ran out, they used debris. When the bridge finally fell, they had bought enough time for 16,000 civilians to escape. The hologram showed Marcus as he'd been on the 3rd day, older somehow, despite only 72 hours having passed, leading a squad of 7 through enemy territory, carrying wounded civilians on makeshift stretchers. The remaining human forces scattered into the mountains, waging guerrilla warfare. They turned the Sovereign's superior numbers against them, using the terrain, their knowledge of human military history, and something the sovereign commanders never anticipated. Zixthal paused, her eyes finding Marcus again. They fought like humans had always fought when defending the helpless, with a ferocity that made no tactical sense, with a stubborn refusal to accept reality, with a collective decision that honor mattered more than survival. The final hologram showed the evacuation's end result: 39,217 civilians saved, 147 human soldiers, 23 survivors. Marcus was one of them. The Sovereign fleet withdrew from Kepler 442b 3 days after the humans' last stand. Not because they were militarily defeated, but because their troops refused to face the human defenders again. An entire invasion force, traumatized by 147 soldiers who should have retreated. Zixthal turned off the hologram. The lecture hall remained silent. Lieutenant Chen's species has a saying, "Old enough to fight, old enough to die." But that is not why we study this battle. Her 6 eyes swept across the room. We study it because the humans teach us that age is not measured in years. It is measured in the moment you decide some things are worth dying for. She looked directly at the Vrelian cadet. So when you see a young human and think they are too inexperienced, too naive, too idealistic to be a warrior, remember this: their entire species earned their reputation one impossible stand at a time. Class dismissed. As the cadets filed out, several approached Marcus, their earlier skepticism replaced with something like reverence. He accepted their words awkwardly, still uncomfortable with the attention. The Vrelian cadet was the last to approach. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice formal. "I apologize for my earlier words." Marcus extended his hand. "We all have to prove ourselves. I just had a head start." As they shook hands, Marcus caught his reflection in the darkened holographic display. He barely recognized the young corporal from 3 years ago, but he understood now why Commander Zixthal had started with that image. Not to embarrass him, but to remind every cadet in that room of a simple truth: heroes aren't born. They're forged in the moments when retreat would be easier, and survival would be wiser. But something inside refuses to accept either option. Sometimes, the youngest soldier teaches the oldest lesson: some things are worth fighting for,